Good evening, my friends. Wherever you are tonight, take a deep breath, because what we are about to uncover moves beneath the news cycle, behind the speeches, and far beyond the maps. It is a story that begins in the dust of the Sahel, where empires pretend to leave but never truly do. They told us France had departed. They said the Sahel was finally free. But in geopolitics, silence is never peace. It is the pause between two storms. When the last French convoy rolled out of Combonzin in 2023, the world celebrated. Cameras caught soldiers waving, flags came down, and the headlines declared a new chapter for Burkina Faso. Yet beneath that dust, a different script was being written, one not by the hands of the people, but by the same powers who had ruled from afar for decades. Because, as Captain Ibrahim Traoré once warned, the empire does not leave, it adapts. Across the golden plains and harsh deserts, antennas rose where flags fell. Bases renamed as training centers, advisors rebranded as civilian contractors. The uniforms changed, but the orders remained the same. From Abidjan to Niamey, lines of surveillance and logistics formed a pattern so precise it couldn't be coincidence. France had not withdrawn it, had simply repositioned. In the calm of Ouagadougou, Traoré studied satellite images late into the night. He didn't need intelligence briefings to see what was happening. He knew the pattern, the same one that had haunted Africa for generations. Control without presence, influence without visibility. They are not gone, he murmured. They've only changed formation. The air grew heavy with that truth. For too long, the Sahel had been told that liberation came when foreign boots left its soil. But true independence, Traoré knew, would not come from an empty base. It would come when no one else could dictate how that land was defended, built, or imagined. Months passed, and reports began surfacing from Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. France's military footprint had shrunk, yet drone activity in the region had increased by 40%. There were fewer soldiers, but far more surveillance. The sky had become the new battlefield. Western governments called it modernization. Traoré called it mutation. The same missions that once bore French insignias were now disguised under European Union or United Nations mandates. The same advisors returned, this time in civilian clothes. Infrastructure projects quietly doubled as logistics corridors linking to old French installations. Aid turned into leverage, and contracts turned into chains. In the villages of Kaya and Dori, the people noticed first. Drones still hummed overhead at dusk. Checkpoints manned by foreign trainers still demanded identification. "They said they left," whispered an old farmer, "but their shadow still covers our land." When Traoré addressed the National Assembly that spring, he did not shout. His voice was calm, his message sharper than any weapon. "If a foreign soldier teaches our troops, maps our terrain, and names our missions," he said, "whose strategy is it, ours or theirs?" The chamber fell silent. The silence that followed was not fear, it was awakening. That moment marked a turning point. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger began speaking with one voice. They refused to wait for international approval to secure their own borders. And thus, the Alliance of Sahel States, the AES, was born. To the west, it looked like rebellion. To those living it, it was reclamation. For the first time, the Sahel wasn't being organized from Paris or Washington, it was organizing itself. The AES became more than an alliance. It became a declaration that Africa's security would no longer be outsourced. But every act of sovereignty invites resistance. Western institutions began reshaping the narrative, claiming the AES was falling under non-democratic influence. Sanctions crept in, development loans froze. Insurance ratings collapsed overnight. No armies invaded, but economies suffocated. In one meeting, an aide described it as pressure without fingerprints. Traoré only smiled. Then, he said, "We will build with our own hands." His response wasn't just defiance, it was strategy. Burkina Faso redirected military budgets into agriculture. The fields of the north, once abandoned, began to grow again. Local engineers designed small solar grids. The country was not chasing luxury, it was chasing endurance. When asked by a reporter if sanctions would break them, Traoré replied, "You can sanction accounts, but not conviction." That sentence became a slogan whispered through markets and schools, printed on walls, and sung in marches. And something extraordinary happened. People began believing again, not in governments, but in themselves. Radio hosts stopped quoting Western headlines and started reading AES communiques. Teachers replaced imported textbooks with lessons on Thomas Sankara, Patrice Lumumba, and African self-reliance. In Ouagadougou, a mural appeared overnight, a lion breaking its chains under a rising sun. Beneath it, a single word, souveraineté. Even those who had lost everything found new purpose. One widow, Maimouna, who had buried her son after the 2022 attacks, began sewing uniforms for local defense units. When a journalist asked her why, she said, "If they fight for our land, I can at least stitch their courage." That line spread across the Sahel faster than any speech, a quiet anthem of dignity. While analysts in Western capitals debated strategy, something irreversible was happening on the ground. The people were learning that freedom wasn't a gift from the powerful, it was a discipline of the ordinary. By mid-2024, Paris and Washington had grown uneasy. Press briefings praised the Sahel's right to self-determination, then immediately warned of Russian or Chinese interference. But inside the AES, the mood was clear. They weren't trading one master for another. They were standing on their own. In Bamako, soldiers trained without foreign instructors. In Niamey, local engineers developed reconnaissance drones from recycled parts. In Ouagadougou, command centers glowed with real-time AES coordination for the first time under local control. The West saw defiance, the Sahel saw direction. Traoré's philosophy was simple. Independence, he told his officers one night, is not a date, it is a duty. His words carried the weight of centuries, a reminder that colonization ends only when the mind stops seeking permission. He told them, "Empires no longer rule with soldiers, they rule with narratives. Our task is to rewrite them." And rewrite they did. Across the AES, a new lexicon emerged: sovereignty, discipline, endurance. The people began to measure progress not by GDP charts from Paris, but by the number of local engineers trained, wells dug, and borders defended without external command. The transformation was slow, invisible, and unstoppable. Markets reopened under local management, farmers traded directly across borders. Young students in Bobo Dioulasso recited pledges that no longer mentioned colonial names. Burkina Faso was no longer just surviving, it was redefining itself. By early 2025, the AES had built a system once thought impossible, a regional defense framework operating independently of Western approval, shared intelligence, joint patrols, common energy corridors. What began as rebellion had become architecture. Western analysts described it as anti-Western militarization, but those living within it knew better. It was not hatred, it was healing. In Washington, think tanks redrew maps of influence, uneasy at the idea that three landlocked nations could stand without foreign scaffolding. If the Sahel could sustain itself, what would that say to the rest of the world? To Latin America, Southeast Asia, or anywhere dependency was sold as development? A professor in Dakar captured it best: they are not rejecting the West, they are rejecting permission. And perhaps that's why the story of Ibrahim Traoré unsettles so many. Because it is not the tale of a soldier rising against empires, it is the story of a continent remembering that it doesn't need them. When he walks through the camps, Traoré doesn't speak in grand slogans. He speaks like a man aware that his role is temporary, but his people's awakening is permanent. He tells them, if we are to defend our soil, we must also defend our story. The world may call him a revolutionary. To his soldiers, he is a reminder that leadership is not about power, but about protecting clarity. And so, under the heat of the Sahel sun, Burkina Faso marches not toward confrontation, but toward comprehension. Toward a future where decisions are not dictated by distant capitals, but by those who live with their consequences. Tonight, as the lights of Ouagadougou flicker across newly built grids, children read under bulbs powered by local energy. Farmers sell their grain to local buyers, not foreign middlemen. Soldiers patrol their borders without radioing for permission. The Empire's shadow still lingers, yes, but its grip is loosening. The French flags are gone, but the mindset of dependency still echoes. And that is the battle Traoré fights every day, the battle of perception, the invisible frontier of freedom. "They taught us to salute flags," he once said. "Now we are learning to salute ourselves." That sentence, carried by wind and willpower, defines this moment in African history. Because the true revolution was never about soldiers or sanctions. It was about sight-seeing clearly where influence hides and daring to step beyond it. Across the Sahel, the night sky glows with the same stars that watched over the old empires. But this time, the land below hums with a different rhythm, a rhythm of awakening, of unity, of quiet defiance. Empires may disguise themselves with aid, diplomacy, or technology, but conviction once awakened is immune to camouflage. So tonight, as you watch this story unfold, remember, France may have left the Sahel in body, but its shadow still tries to shape the light. And yet, in the heart of Burkina Faso, that light now belongs to those who refuse to be ruled by shadows. Because silence in history never means surrender. It only means that something powerful is gathering strength, and this time, it carries the name Ibrahim Traoré.